The merchant vessel Gentle Current drifted through the void between stars, its hull scarred from countless jumps through hyperspace. Captain Zixera clicked her mandibles nervously as she reviewed the passenger manifest for the 100th time. Among the usual collection of traders, diplomats, and refugees fleeing the Outer Rim conflicts, one entry made her chitinous exoskeleton crawl with unease. Passenger 847, species, human, Deathworlder. Destination, Kepler Station. Special requirements, standard atmospheric mix, gravity compensation disabled. Asterisk gravity compensation disabled. Zixara Shuddarat. Only a creature from a death world would voluntarily subject itself to the ship's full artificial gravity. Most civilized species require the compensation fields to reduce the crushing 0.8 g that the ship generated to a more manageable 0.3 g. But this human had specifically requested the full force. Captain, her communications officer, Felnax, chirped from his station. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. They're requesting permission to board. Zixaras Farasank. The GCD only made unscheduled boarding requests for one reason. Someone on her ship was wanted for crimes against galactic peace. She glanced again at the passenger manifest, her eyes inevitably drawn to the human's entry. Grant them permission, she ordered reluctantly, and alert security to be ready for anything. 20 minutes later, the docking bay filled with the measured footsteps of GCD enforcement officers. They moved with the practiced efficiency of beings who had seen too much violence and lived to tell about it. At their head walked a figure that made even the battle-hardened crew step back instinctively. Vexthal the Hunter had earned his reputation across 17 star systems. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his reptilian form was augmented with the finest military cybernetics the Galactic Council could provide. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of 100 successful hunts, and his eyes held the cold certainty of death itself. When Vexthal came for you, running was merely a way to die tired. I require access to your passenger compartments, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. We have reason to believe you are harboring a fugitive. Captain Zixera's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Of course, Hunter. May I ask who you're seeking? Vexthal's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile on a less terrifying face. A human. Marcus Chun, formerly of the Terran Colonial Marines. He is wanted for the destruction of a GCD prison transport and the liberation of several high-value political prisoners. The name sent a chill through the bridge crew. Everyone had heard the stories of human colonial marines. Even among Deathworlders, they were considered something special, something dangerous. The human is in quarters 17 on deck 4. Zixera provided quickly. But, Hunter, I must warn you. He has been unusual during the journey. Unusual how? He spends most of his time in the cargo bay, exercising, without any protective gear or gravity compensation. My crew has been too frightened to approach him directly. Vexthal's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused. In his centuries of hunting, he had tracked down criminals from every known species. Gas-form beings who could slip through the tiniest cracks, silicon-based life forms who could hibernate for decades, even energy beings who existed primarily as living plasma. But humans are different. They didn't just survive their harsh world. They thrived on conflict itself. Your crew's fear is wise, he rumbled. Humans are not like other Deathworlders. Where others adapt to survive, humans adapt to dominate. But I have hunted his kind before. As they made their way through the ship's corridors, other passengers pressed themselves against the walls, instinctively recognizing the presence of an apex predator. The hunter moved with deadly grace, each step calculated and precise. His reputation preceded him like a shadow of death. They found the cargo bay doors sealed, with warning lights blinking in 17 different languages. All of them essentially said the same thing. Danger, Deathworlder exercise in progress, do not enter. Through the reinforced transparent steel viewport, they could see him. Marcus Chin didn't look like much at first glance. Compared to Vexthul's imposing 3-meter frame, the human seemed almost small, perhaps 1.8 meters tall, with a lean build typical of his species. But as they watched, he performed feats that defied understanding. The human was lifting massive cargo containers over his head repeatedly, each one weighing what should have been impossible for a creature his size. Sweat poured down his skin as he moved through a routine that would have killed most galactic citizens outright. Between sets, he dropped to the deck and performed rapid push-ups, his body moving like a perfectly calibrated machine. Fascinating, Vexthul murmured. He's training in gravity nearly 3 times what most species can tolerate. And that's without compensation. Captain Zixera watched nervously as the hunter studied his quarry. Will you be able to take him alive? The Council's bounty specifies live capture. Vexthul's scarred face showed the closest thing to uncertainty that any of the crew had ever seen on a hunter's features. That remains to be seen. Humans are unpredictable. They have a tendency to exceed their expected parameters when cornered. As if sensing their observation, Marcus Chun suddenly stopped his routine and turned toward the viewport. His eyes met Vexthul's through the transparent steel, and for a long moment, Predator stared at Predator. The human's face was calm, almost serene, but something in his posture, the way he held his shoulders, spoke of a being who had faced death before and found it wanting. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus walked to the cargo bay controls and disabled the warning system. The doors hissed open. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily across the bay despite the vast space. "I've been expecting you." Vexthul stepped into the cargo bay, his enforcement officers fanning out behind him. The human made no move to flee or attack. Instead, he reached for a simple cloth towel and wiped the sweat from his face with casual indifference. "Marcus Chun," the hunter announced formally, "by the authority of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division, you're under arrest for crimes against galactic peace. Surrender now, and you will not be harmed." The human's laugh was not the sound of madness or fear. It was the laugh of someone who found genuine amusement in the situation. "Not be harmed? Hunter, I appreciate the professional courtesy, but we both know how this is going to end. You will come with us," Vexthul stated, his hand moving to the plasma weapon at his side. "Resistance will only make your eventual capture more difficult." Marcus folded the towel neatly and set it aside. When he turned back to face them, something had changed in his posture. The casual human was gone, replaced by something that made even Vexthul's cybernetic systems register elevated threat levels. "Hunter," Marcus said quietly, "let me tell you something about humans that your files probably don't mention. We don't just come from a death world. We turn our world into a death world. Every predator, every natural disaster, every disease and toxin and environmental hazard that could kill us, we made them better at killing us. And then we made ourselves better at surviving them." The enforcement officers shifted nervously, their weapons trained on the human, but their confidence visibly shaking. Something about his calm certainty was more unsettling than any threat. "For millions of years," Marcus continued, beginning to circle slowly around the cargo bay, "everything on our planet tried to kill us. The weather, the wildlife, the very bacteria in our soil. Do you know what that does to a species, Hunter? It doesn't just make them strong. It makes them angry." Vexthul's scarred features tightened. In his centuries of hunting, he had learned to recognize when prey became dangerous. The human was exhibiting all the warning signs, but something was different. Most cornered prey showed desperation or fear. This human showed anticipation. "You're stalling," the hunter observed. "But there is nowhere to run, Marcus Chun. This cargo bay is sealed, and my officers have the only exit covered." "Stalling?" Marcus stopped his circling and faced them directly. "Hunter, I'm not stalling. I'm warming up." Without warning, the human moved. Even with cybernetic enhancements that could track hypersonic projectiles, Vexthul almost missed the initial movement. Marcus didn't charge directly at them as expected. Instead, he leaped upward with impossible force, using the cargo bay's high ceiling to his advantage. The enforcement officers opened fire, their plasma bolts lighting up the bay like deadly fireworks. But the human was no longer where their weapons were aimed. He ricocheted off the ceiling, off the walls, using his species' legendary spatial awareness and reflexes to become a living projectile. Vexthul's cybernetic eye calculated trajectories and predicted movement patterns, but the human seemed to change direction in mid-air, defying physics in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The hunter's own shot went wide as Marcus landed behind two officers and struck with precise, devastating force. The first officer went down from a blow that should have been impossible for a creature of Marcus's size to deliver. The second managed to turn his weapon before the human's hand closed around his throat with crushing force. Impossible, Vexthul breathed, watching his trained enforcement officers fall to what appeared to be an unarmed human using nothing but brute force and impossible agility. Marcus straightened from his crouch, now holding two plasma rifles with casual competence. His breathing wasn't even elevated despite the explosive violence of the previous seconds. "Hunter," he said conversationally, "your officers are alive. Unconscious, but alive. I could have killed them, but I chose not to. Do you know why?" Vexthul's own weapon was trained on the human, but uncertainty held his finger back from the trigger. Everything he knew about tactical situations said he should fire, but something about the human's confidence suggested that might not end well for him. "Because," Marcus continued, "I'm not the criminal you think I am. Those political prisoners I liberated, they were children, Hunter. Juveniles who had been disappeared for the crime of asking questions their governments didn't want answered." The words hit Vexthul like physical blows. His cybernetic systems immediately began accessing the classified files on the case, information that had been kept from him during the briefing. What he found made his cold blood run even colder. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Check your secure files, Hunter. Really check them. Look at the ages of the prisoners I liberated. Look at their crimes. Then ask yourself whether the Galactic Council told you the whole truth when they sent you after me." Vexthul's cybernetic implants worked frantically, accessing databases that should have been beyond his clearance level. But years of hunting had taught him how to find information that others wanted hidden. What he discovered made him question everything he thought he knew about his mission. The prisoners had indeed been juveniles. Children, by any reasonable definition. Their crimes had been nothing more than asking uncomfortable questions about their government's policies. And their fate in GCD custody had been sealed from the moment of their arrest. They were scheduled for termination, Marcus said quietly, somehow reading the hunter's expression despite his cybernetic modifications. Not trial, not rehabilitation, termination, because someone in the Galactic Council decided that asking questions was a crime worthy of death. The cargo bay fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Vexthul found himself at a crossroads he had never expected to face. His entire existence had been built on the certainty that the Galactic Council represented order and justice. But the evidence before him suggested otherwise. "Even if what you say is true," the hunter said slowly, "you still destroyed a prison transport. You still violated galactic law." Marcus nodded. "I did, and I'd do it again. Because sometimes, Hunter, the law and justice aren't the same thing. Sometimes when the system fails, individuals have to stand up and do what's right." The human set down the plasma rifles with deliberate care, his hands empty and non-threatening. But somehow, that made him seem more dangerous, not less. "So here's what's going to happen," Marcus said. "You're going to have to decide what kind of hunter you really are. Are you someone who hunts criminals, or are you someone who hunts for the council regardless of right and wrong? Because those aren't always the same thing." Vexthul's weapon remained trained on the human, but his certainty continued to crumble. In centuries of hunting, he had never questioned a mission, never doubted the righteousness of his cause. But this Deathworlder had managed to do what no quarry had ever accomplished. He had made the hunter think. The standoff stretched between them, predator facing predator, while the fate of more than just their personal conflict hung in the balance. Because in that cargo bay, with unconscious officers and discarded weapons scattered around them. The real hunt was just beginning. And for the first time in his long career, Vexthul wasn't certain who was the hunter and who was the prey. The silence in the cargo bay stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest pressure. Vexthul's cybernetic systems ran continuous threat assessments, but every calculation came back with the same impossible result. The human was completely relaxed, yet more dangerous than any quarry he had ever faced. "You're waiting for me to make a decision," the hunter observed, his weapon still trained on Marcus Chun. "But you already know what choice I'm going to make, don't you?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying the legendary hunter with calm interest. "I know what choice you should make. What choice you will make depends on whether you're still the being who started hunting criminals, or whether you've become something else entirely. And what do you think I've become?" "A tool," Marcus said simply. "A very effective tool, but still just a tool. The question is whether you remember that tools can choose their masters." Vexthul's scarred features tightened. No quarry had ever spoken to him like this. Most begged, threatened, or tried to bargain. This human was conducting what felt almost like a job interview. "You speak as if you know me," the hunter said. "I know your reputation." Vexthul the hunter. 347 successful captures over 2 centuries. Not a single escape. Not a single failure. Marcus began moving again, not aggressively, but with the casual confidence of someone completely at ease with violence. "But I also know something else about you. Something your files don't mention. Which is, you've never killed an innocent. Not once. Every target you've brought in was guilty of exactly what they were accused of. That's not luck, Hunter. That's choice." Vexthul's cybernetic eye whirred as it refocused. The human was right, though he had never thought of it in those terms. In 2 centuries of hunting, there had been opportunities to eliminate targets who might have been innocent. Circumstances where a quick death would have been easier than a difficult capture. But he had always found another way. "How could you possibly know that?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time, there was something genuinely warm in the expression. "Because I spent 3 years studying you before I started this mission. I knew the Council would send you after me eventually, and I knew that if anyone could understand what I was trying to do, it would be you. 3 years. Vexthul's systems automatically began calculating the implications. "You planned all of this? Every bit of it? The prison transport, the escape route, even booking passage on this specific ship. I knew you'd track me here. I knew you'd corner me in this cargo bay. And I knew we'd have this conversation." The hunter's weapon wavered for the first time. "You wanted to be caught. I wanted to meet you. There's a difference." Marcus gestured to the unconscious enforcement officers. "Your team will wake up in about 10 minutes. They'll be groggy but unharmed. When they do, you'll need to decide what story you're going to tell them." Vexthul found himself in completely uncharted territory. Every instinct told him to complete the mission, to bring in his quarry regardless of the circumstances. But something deeper, something he had thought long buried under centuries of cybernetic enhancement and professional conditioning, was stirring to life. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Help," Marcus said simply. "The children I liberated aren't safe yet. The Council will hunt them across the galaxy, if necessary. They need someone who can give them protection, someone with the authority to make their persecution stop. I'm a hunter, not a guardian. You're whatever you choose to be. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose." The words hit like physical blows. Brave enough to choose. When was the last time Vexthul had made a real choice about anything? His missions came from the Council. His targets were assigned. His methods were approved by committee. For 2 centuries, he had been the perfect instrument of someone else's will. "Where are they?" he asked quietly. Marcus's eyes sharpened with interest. "Safe. For now. But they won't stay that way without help. The Council has classified them as enemy combatants. Shoot-on-sight orders have already been issued. Children. Children who ask the wrong questions to the wrong people." Vexthul's weapon finally lowered. The motion felt strange, alien, as if his arm was moving independently of his conscious control. "What were the questions?" Why are Deathworld species kept segregated from the galactic mainstream? Why are humans specifically restricted from joining the Council military? Why are there colonies throughout the Outer Rim that no longer appear on any official maps? Each question landed with the force of revelation. Vexthul had wondered about some of those same things during his long career, but had never thought to voice such concerns. Hunters followed orders, they didn't question policy. And what answers did they find? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much truth. That the galactic community isn't a community at all. It's a carefully maintained hierarchy designed to keep certain species in power and others under control. Deathworlders, especially humans, represent a threat to that hierarchy. Because we're too dangerous? No, because we're too free. Most species evolved in environments that taught them to find their place in a natural order. Humans evolved in an environment that taught them to fight the natural order until it submitted. That kind of thinking is contagious. The implications crashed over Vexthul like a tidal wave. Everything he had believed about galactic civilization, about his place in it, about the righteousness of his missions, suddenly seemed far less certain. "You're talking about revolution," he said. "I'm talking about evolution. Natural progression that someone is trying very hard to prevent." Marcus gestured to the cargo bay around them. "Look at this ship. A merchant vessel carrying refugees from conflicts they didn't start, fleeing to stations they can't afford, hoping for opportunities they'll never receive. And that's the good outcome for most species. While others live in comfort and security. While others live in comfort and security paid for by maintaining that suffering." Vexthul's cybernetic systems were still processing the classified files he had accessed. The more he read, the worse it became. The prison transport Marcus had destroyed was just one small part of a massive operation. Dissidents, rebels, and inconvenient individuals disappeared regularly throughout the galaxy. Not through any official judicial process, but through a shadow system that operated beyond any oversight. "How many?" he asked. "How many what? How many others like you are out there? How many operations like yours?" Marcus smiled again, but this time there was something predatory in the expression. Something that reminded Vexthul that he was still facing a Deathworlder who had single-handedly destroyed a military transport. "Hunter, I'm not unique. I'm not special. I'm just one human who got tired of watching children die for asking questions. But there are millions of humans scattered across the galaxy, and more every day are starting to ask the same questions those kids did." The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop several degrees. Vexthul realized he wasn't just looking at a single criminal anymore. He was looking at the advance wave of something much larger. Something that could reshape the entire galactic order. A rebellion. An awakening. The galaxy is about to discover what happens when a species that conquered its own death world decides that the current system isn't working for them. One of the unconscious enforcement officers stirred, groaning as consciousness began to return. The moment of decision was approaching rapidly. Soon, Vexthul would have to explain what had happened in this cargo bay. He would have to file a report. He would have to decide whether he was still the hunter he had always been, or something else entirely. "What happens to me?" he asked. "If I help you, what happens to my career? My reputation? What happens to your conscience if you don't?" The officer was sitting up now, shaking his head to clear it. In moments, he would be fully aware and expecting explanations. Vexthul looked at his weapon, still pointed at the deck. He looked at Marcus, standing calmly in the center of the cargo bay. He looked at the unconscious officers, alive because the human had chosen mercy over efficiency. And he made his choice. "Officer Krelnax," he said loudly, causing the stirring enforcement officer to focus on him. "Report." The officer struggled to his feet, confusion evident in his movements. "Sir, what happened? Where's the human?" Vexthul holstered his weapon with deliberate ceremony. The human surrendered peacefully. No shots were fired. "You and Officer Daxmill were overcome by a malfunctioning atmosphere processor. Temporary unconsciousness from oxygen deprivation." Krelnax looked around the cargo bay, clearly trying to piece together events that didn't match his memory. "Sir? But I thought there was fighting." "Hallucinations from the oxygen deprivation," Vex Thul said firmly. "Submit yourself for medical evaluation immediately. Officer Daxmill as well." As the confused officers stumbled out of the cargo bay, Vex Thul turned back to Marcus. The human was watching him with something that might have been respect. "That was a big step," Marcus observed. "That was the first step," Vex Thul corrected. "Where do we go from here?" "That depends. Are you ready to learn what a real hunt looks like?" "I've been hunting for 2 centuries. You've been following orders for 2 centuries. Hunting is different. Hunting means choosing your own prey." Marcus walked to one of the cargo containers and pressed his hand against a concealed panel. The container opened with a soft hiss, revealing sophisticated communication equipment and data storage devices. "I told you I've been planning this for 3 years," he said. "What I didn't mention is what I've been planning for." Vex Thul approached the container cautiously. The equipment inside was military-grade, but not from any military he recognized. The design aesthetics were distinctly human, but far more advanced than anything the Terran colonies were supposed to possess. "What is this?" "Communication array. Quantum encrypted, impossible to trace or intercept. It connects to a network that spans 17 star systems and includes over 2,000 active operatives." "Operatives?" "Humans mostly, but also members of other Deathworld species who've started asking the same questions those children asked. Beings who've decided that the current galactic order isn't serving anyone except those already in power." Vex Thul stared at the equipment, his cybernetic systems automatically analyzing the technology. What he found made his blood freeze. This wasn't just advanced. This was revolutionary. The humans had been busy while the galactic community assumed they were safely contained in their own colonies. This is military technology. This is liberation technology. The difference is in how you use it. Marcus activated the communication array with practiced efficiency. Holographic displays sprang to life, showing star maps, operational schedules, and data streams that painted a picture of galactic civilization that few had ever seen. "Hunter, meet the real galaxy. The one that exists underneath all the treaties and trade agreements and diplomatic protocols." The displays showed refugee movements that weren't in any official records. Resource extraction operations that violated every galactic environmental treaty. Prison facilities that didn't appear on any map. And throughout it all, a pattern of systematic oppression that maintained the current power structure through methods that would horrify most galactic citizens if they knew. How long has this been going on? Since the beginning. The galactic community was never meant to be a community. It was meant to be a hierarchy with certain species at the top and everyone else serving their interests. The only thing that's changed is that now someone is finally doing something about it. Vex Thul studied the data streams, his hunter's instincts automatically identifying patterns and connections. What he saw was a shadow war that had been going on for decades without the knowledge of the galactic public. A war between those who wanted to maintain the status quo and those who demanded change. And you want me to join this war? I want you to choose a side, because whether you join us or not, the war is coming. The only question is whether you'll be part of the solution or part of the problem. The communication array chimed softly, and a new data stream opened. Vex Thul recognized the transmission protocols immediately. It was a priority communication from the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. His next assignment. "They're calling you back," Marcus observed. Vex Thul accessed the transmission, his cybernetic systems decrypting the encoded orders. As he read, his expression grew darker. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "New mission parameters. They want me to track down a group of refugees who've been spreading seditious materials in the Outer Rim colonies. Children again? Families. Entire family groups who've been asking questions about missing relatives." Marcus nodded grimly. Questions that might lead them to discover the same things those children discovered. Vex Thul stared at the mission orders, feeling something fundamental shifting inside his cybernetically enhanced consciousness. For 2 centuries, he had been the perfect hunter. He had never questioned an assignment, never doubted the righteousness of his cause, never failed to bring in his quarry. But now, looking at orders to hunt down families whose only crime was asking about their missing loved ones, he couldn't find that perfect certainty anymore. "What do you need me to do?" he asked quietly. Marcus's smile was fierce and proud. "I need you to remember that being a hunter means choosing your own prey. And I need you to help me hunt the biggest prey of all, which is the system itself. The entire corrupt structure that's been grinding up innocents for centuries while calling it justice." Vexthul looked at the communication array, at the mission orders, at the human who had somehow managed to accomplish what no quarry had ever done before. Marcus Chun had escaped him, not by running, not by hiding, but by converting him. "When do we start?" the hunter asked. Outside the cargo bay, the ship continued its journey through the void between stars. But inside, something new was being born, an alliance that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization itself. Because when a hunter chose new prey, the entire galaxy became the hunting ground. 3 months later, the mining station Zirian, 7 hung in the darkness of space like a metallic tumor, its industrial complexes sucking resources from the dead planet below. To most of the galaxy, it was just another resource extraction facility. But to Marcus Chun and his growing network of operatives, it was something far more sinister. Vexthul crouched in the maintenance shaft beside the human, his massive frame barely fitting in the cramped space. The irony wasn't lost on him that the galaxy's most feared hunter was now sneaking through ventilation systems like a common saboteur. But then everything about his life had become ironic since that day in the cargo bay. "Remind me again why we're not just blasting our way in," he whispered, his scarred features barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. Marcus checked his scanner for the 3rd time in 5 minutes, his expression grim. "Because blasting our way in would alert them, and they'd start killing prisoners before we could reach them. These aren't military targets, Hunter. They're civilians. Families." The word families had taken on new meaning for Vexthul over the past 3 months. He had seen the classified reports that Marcus's network had uncovered. Zirian 7 wasn't just a mining operation. It was a processing center where inconvenient individuals were sent to disappear permanently. The workers weren't employees. They were prisoners whose only crime had been asking the wrong questions or belonging to the wrong species. "Movement ahead," Marcus indicated, raising his fist to signal a stop. Through the grating in front of them, they could see a patrol of station security passing below. The guards were Vorthak, a species known for their efficiency and their complete lack of curiosity about their orders. Perfect enforcers for operations that required moral blindness. Vexthul had hunted Vorthak before. They were dangerous but predictable, following established patterns with mechanical precision. What disturbed him now was how easily he had shifted from hunting criminals to hunting the enforcers of what he was beginning to understand was a fundamentally criminal system. 2 guards, standard patrol pattern, he observed. They'll pass the intersection in 40 seconds, giving us a 3-minute window to reach the detention level. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on something else. His scanner was picking up something that made his blood run cold. "Hunter, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that makes this personal." Marcus showed him the scanner display. "That energy signature 3 levels down? That's human bioelectric activity. A lot of it." Vexthul's cybernetic eye processed the data, cross-referencing it with station schematics that his enforcement authority had granted him access to. What he found made him understand why Marcus had suddenly gone very still and very quiet. "That's not on the official prisoner manifest," the hunter observed. "No, it's not." Marcus's voice carried a lethal calm that Vexthul had learned to recognize. It was the voice of a human who was about to do something that would reshape local reality in violent and permanent ways. Which means these aren't official prisoners. Black site operation. Worse, look at the bioelectric patterns. Most of those readings are consistent with juveniles. Vexthul felt something cold and furious uncurl in his chest. In 3 months of working with Marcus, he had learned to understand human emotional patterns. The complete stillness that had overtaken his partner wasn't calm. It was rage so pure and focused that it had transcended normal emotional expression. "How many?" the hunter asked. 47. Mostly children. Some adults, probably parents who try to find them. Marcus closed the scanner with controlled precision. "Change of plan, Hunter. We're not sneaking anymore." "Marcus, wait. If we go in aggressive, they'll what? Kill them? Look at those readings again. Half of them are already dying. Malnutrition, disease, the kind of systematic neglect that's designed to solve the prisoner problem through attrition." Vexthul looked again at the scanner data, his cybernetic systems analyzing the biological indicators with clinical precision. Marcus was right. The bioelectric signatures showed the unmistakable signs of beings in the final stages of systematic abuse. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus pulled a device from his pack that Vexthul didn't recognize. It looked like standard human military equipment, but the energy readings it was giving off suggested something far more advanced than anything in the official technology databases. "Remember how I told you that humans have been busy while the galaxy thought they were contained in their colonies?" "Yes. Meet the M47 disruptor. It generates an electromagnetic pulse specifically tuned to disable Galactic Council security systems while leaving human-safe technology operational." Vexthul stared at the device, his hunter's instincts automatically calculating its implications. "That's not possible. The security protocols are quantum encrypted. Nothing can disrupt them without knowing the encryption keys." Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Hunter, who do you think designed the security protocols in the first place?" The implications hit like a physical blow. "Humans. Humans working under Galactic Council oversight, with built-in safeguards and backdoors that our supervisors never bothered to understand. We've been planning for this day a lot longer than anyone realizes." Marcus activated the disruptor, and immediately every light on the station flickered. Emergency klaxons began wailing as security systems throughout the facility went dark. But the device in Marcus's hand continued to function perfectly, as did Vexthul's cybernetic systems. "Human-safe technology? Your cybernetics were actually built by a subsidiary company owned by humans. Corporate shell games are wonderful things when you're planning a revolution." They dropped through the maintenance shaft into the corridor below, landing in a station that had suddenly become blind and deaf to their presence. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, but both Marcus and Vexthul were equipped for low-light operations. "The detention level is this way," Marcus said, moving with the fluid precision of someone who had studied the station schematics until he could navigate them blindfolded. As they made their way through the corridors, Vexthul found himself marveling at the scope of planning that had gone into this operation. Every system failure, every security vulnerability, every tactical advantage had been calculated and prepared for in advance. "How long?" he asked as they reached a security checkpoint that was now completely non-functional. "How long what? How long have humans been planning this?" Marcus paused at the checkpoint, using a device to override the mechanical locks that remained functional. "Since the day we joined the galactic community and realized we'd been invited to be second-class citizens in our own galaxy." They found the detention level exactly where the scanner had indicated. What they found there made even Vexthul, with his centuries of experience tracking down the worst criminals in the galaxy, stop and stare in horror. The cells were designed for species that required significantly less space and resources than their current occupants. Humans, including children barely old enough to walk, were crammed into spaces meant for much smaller beings. The conditions were deliberately designed to be lethal over time, creating a system where deaths could be attributed to natural causes rather than deliberate execution. "Sweet merciful void," Vexthul breathed. Marcus said nothing. He simply began opening cell doors with mechanical efficiency, his movements sharp and precise. The prisoners who emerged were in various stages of malnutrition and disease, but their eyes held something that surprised the hunter. "Hope, you came," whispered an elderly human woman, her voice weak but steady. "We knew someone would come eventually." "How did you know?" Vexthul asked. A young human boy, maybe 10 years old in standard galactic age, looked up at the massive hunter with eyes far too old for his face. "Because humans don't leave people behind. Not ever." The simple statement hit Vexthul like a revelation. In all his centuries of hunting, he had tracked down fugitives from dozens of species. All of them eventually abandoned their allies when the pursuit became too intense. But these humans had somehow maintained faith that rescue would come, even in the face of systematic extermination. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked the assembled prisoners. "We can walk," the elderly woman replied. "The question is, where are we walking to?" Marcus activated his communication array, and immediately the space around them filled with holographic displays showing ship positions throughout the local system. "We're walking to freedom. But first, we need to make sure this never happens again." Vexthul recognized the tactical display immediately. It showed the positions of 3 human ships, running completely dark and undetectable by standard galactic sensors. They had been waiting in the system for hours, possibly days, ready to extract the prisoners the moment the rescue operation succeeded. "Your backup plan?" he observed. "One of them. But we're not just extracting prisoners today, Hunter. We're sending a message." "What kind of message?" Marcus's smile was predatory and fierce. The kind that lets the galaxy know that humans are no longer content to be second-class citizens. The kind that makes it clear that if the Galactic Council wants a war, we're ready to give them one. The hunter watched as the human began setting up additional devices throughout the detention level. Each one was small, innocuous-looking, but Vexthul's cybernetic systems identified them as sophisticated recording and transmission equipment. "You're documenting this." "I'm documenting everything. Every illegal prison, every systematic abuse, every violation of the galactic treaties that the Council claims to uphold. When we're done, every citizen in the galaxy is going to see exactly what their peaceful civilization has been built on." The prisoners were moving now, helping each other despite their own weakened conditions. Vexthul found himself automatically calculating evacuation routes and security responses. His hunter instincts adapted to a new kind of prey. "Station security will respond eventually," he warned. "The electromagnetic pulse won't last forever. It doesn't need to. We just need enough time to get everyone out and upload the evidence to the galactic communication networks." "Upload to what networks?" "The Council controls all major communication channels." Marcus's laugh was genuinely amused. "Hunter, you're still thinking like someone who believes the Council is in control. Watch this." He activated another device, and suddenly, every screen in the detention level came to life with images of what they had just discovered. But more than that, the transmission indicator showed that the signal was being broadcast across 17 star systems simultaneously. Impossible. The Council would jam any unauthorized transmission. They would if they could detect it. But this isn't using Council communication protocols. This is using a human-designed quantum entanglement network that doesn't rely on any infrastructure they control. As they began moving the prisoners toward the extraction point, Vexthul realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. This wasn't just a rescue operation or even a rebellion. This was the opening move in a war that would reshape the entire galactic order. "The Council will respond," he said. "They'll send everything they have. Let them. Every ship they send, every enforcement action they take, every heavy-handed response just proves our point. The galactic community isn't a community. It's an empire. And empires fall." They reached the extraction point just as the first Council enforcement ships began arriving in the system. But the human vessels were already moving, their stealth technology allowing them to slip away before the Council ships even realized they were there. "Impressive technology," Vexthul observed as they boarded the rescue ship. "Hunter, you haven't seen anything yet. We've had 3 centuries to prepare for this day." 3 centuries of being underestimated while we built the infrastructure for our own independence. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its cargo of rescued prisoners towards safety, Vexthul found himself looking at the galaxy through completely different eyes. The civilization he had served for centuries was about to discover that humans were no longer content to accept their assigned place in the galactic hierarchy. What happens now, he asked. Marcus was already planning their next operation, studying tactical displays that showed similar facilities throughout the galaxy. Now we hunt them the way they've been hunting us. Systematically, thoroughly, without mercy. And if they surrender, then we'll show them the mercy they never showed the children in those cells. Looking at the rescued prisoners, seeing the hope returning to their eyes as they realized they were truly free, Vexthul understood something fundamental about humans that the galaxy was about to learn the hard way. They didn't just survive on their death world. They had turned survival into an art form. And now they were about to teach the galaxy what happened when apex predators decided that the current ecosystem wasn't working for them. The hunter had found new prey, and this time, the prey was the entire galactic order itself. The war had begun, and humanity was ready.